So I'd ask everyone to grab their pen or smart device. I'm going to give you my email address and Twitter handle if you're interested in contacting me or staying in contact by either way. It's Michael, Michael, the letter D for David, Ostrolenk, Ostrolenk, @gmail.com. So it's Michael D. Ostrolenk @gmail.com. And then Twitter is @MOstrolenk. So my first initial, my first name, and then my last name. Cool. So transpartisan practices. The first one I'm going to suggest is I am right, media fast. So we all think we're right on our perspectives for the most part. I'm suggesting you take 30 days off from being right and stop reading, listening to, or watching things that confirm your own stance, your own biases, your own perspectives, your own worldviews. So just stop for 30 days. Might not be easy, but I think it's an important practice. At the end, during those 30 days, I would encourage you to pick up, I read magazines, but if you do podcasts, videocasts, however you learn the best, look for other perspectives to dive into that month. And it's important to consider that, we talked the left, right, Republican, Democrat. We want to talk multiplicity of sides. So there's not just, if you're a progressive, not just read the conservative stuff, because there's no such thing as a conservative stuff. There's a multiplicity of worldviews within the conservative movement, as there are a multiplicity of worldviews within what we call the liberal or progressive movement. So what I'm going to do is just lay out some of the things that I read. Doesn't mean you have to read the same ones, but just give you an idea of how I operate in these spaces. So I'm biased with my first suggestion because I write for them, but the American Conservative Magazine. If you want insight into some of the latest thinking amongst conservatives that kind of transcending the old limitations of the neocon, Bush-era Republicanness, it's a great resource. Another magazine that I really enjoy reading is International Socialist Review. I encourage you to do that. Z Magazine is another great periodical. And as I said, these periodicals are also available online, and you don't have to be limited to that. You can podcast or videocast. Utne Magazine, Mother Jones, Reason Magazine. It's a good libertarian periodical. LouRockwell.com. He's an anarcho-capitalist, really hardcore libertarian. And I don't know of hardcore anarcho-green periodicals or websites, but there has to be those as well. EducationRevolution.org is one of my favorite places to go for alternative thinking in education, as an example. They're looking beyond the conventional schooling, whether it's public or private, looking at unschooling, deschooling, homeschooling, democratic free schooling. They have a magazine called The Education Revolution. They also have the website as well. Yes Magazine, I think it's a great periodical as well. Chronicles, they're paleo-conservative. It's really funny because it's sometimes a little bit over my head. The guys who write for them are really well-versed in Catholic theology. I'm not Catholic, so I don't have necessarily that background. In ancient Greek and Roman thought, I don't necessarily have that background either, so a lot of their references go back historically. But really interesting stuff, and it gives you a completely different perspective and view of what some segment of the conservative movement would think about in today's issue areas of today. Now, and I encourage you not just to read, listen, or view these things with your old perspective in mind, like, oh, wait, that's stupid, that's dumb, that's wrong, that's wrong. What I'm suggesting you do is actually embody, or at least encapsulate in your mind, their worldview as your own, just as a thought experiment. Play around with it. Pretend like you are them, and you're just trying to better understand your own and their worldviews. Once you've done that as a practice, you can see where they're coming from, then the next step would be to make distinctions. Like, where are the partial but limited truths within their worldviews? And that's a really important distinction that I try to make for myself, and I encourage everyone else to make, is that your own worldviews, there are some truths there with a small t, but they're limited. Everyone has some truths. all the perspectives, even the ones you hate. There's some truths in there. Find those nuggets and see if you can integrate them into a larger worldview for yourself. I think that's very useful as you operate in your own life as well as in political life. So 30-day fast. All right. Second one is self-inquiry into your political stance. So we all have stances. We all believe in X, Y, or Z. And it's not just a mental construct. Like, we don't just think it's a full body experience. It actually is a stance. I mean, you really stand for something. You embody it. So there's a mental process, there's emotionality. You feel deeply about something that could make you sad or angry or joyful, whatever it happens to be. So you have energetic experiences, bodily experiences, a stance, mental constructs, all organize the story that you tell why that stance that you have is correct. And I'm not suggesting that your stance is wrong or bad. What I'm going to suggest to you, just as a practice, as an inquiry, just for a moment assume that your stance is limited, that there's something else that you can learn that you might want to incorporate into your stance. So there are a few things you can do. One is develop awareness. You need to be aware of the cognitive constructs. How do you think about this particular issue? And just be aware of it. We're not asking you to change it. Just be aware of it. How do you embody it? Like, how do you feel those feelings in your body? Where do you feel those feelings in your body? How do they move through your body? Just develop that awareness. Energetically, how does the energy flow through your body when you hear that issue, or you hear the person on the other side of that issue, and you get kind of, you physiologically respond. Maybe you tighten up. Maybe your gut gets tight. Your breathing restricts. One point is just to become aware of how you organize yourself for your stance. And as you develop and deepen that awareness, you actually begin to free yourself from that stance slightly. It's no longer like your automatic reaction. And my goal for you all is not to change your stance, just to free you from the reactive part of that stance. Because once you become free from the reactive, like, this is who I am, this is my identity, and this is my pattern of behavior, you can be open to taking in new worldviews, new ideas, new perspectives, and even new ways of doing your stance, which might be more productive for you. Perhaps you built your stance at a certain time in your life where that stance served a purpose. 5 years later, you still believe the same thing, but the way you embody that stance no longer serves you. And which brings me to the thought of like skillful means. I have people say to me, I don't understand why that person says what they say that way, because it just really pisses everyone off. Like, they're not going to be heard the way they say it. And I said, well, from my perspective, there's possibly two reasons. One, they really don't want to change hearts and minds. They just want to do their stance and be strong in their stance, which is fine. Not really productive if you want to change other people's hearts and minds, but that's just a way of being in the world, which is fine. If you want to change other people's hearts and minds, though, maybe there's new ways of embodying your own stance that opens other people up, as well as you being open up to hear from them. So my second thing is playing around with your stance. My third practice is what I would call ends and means. And this is kind of where the innovation and playfulness comes in when you're working in coalitions. I have a lot of progressive folks come to me and they say, we just need a couple conservative groups to be part of this effort. And I say, what's the effort? And they say, well, here's our end goal, and here's our means, and here's how we're going to get there. I say, well, just the way you described it to me, I can't think of too many conservatives or libertarians who even want to have that conversation with you. Your means of getting there are counter to everything they believe. Your ends they probably like, but they're not going to be able to even hear you, the ends, because of the way you talk about it and your means. So my suggestion to everyone, conservative, liberal, libertarian, progressive, whatever your stripe is talk to other people. Pick your issue, whatever your issue is. You have an end in mind: healthcare for all, cleaner environment, better education system, whatever floats your boat, lower taxes, whatever it happens to be. Drop your ends for the moment. Just say, I don't know how to get there. And go around to different people from different points on the political spectrum and find out from them how they would get there. Because you might learn so many things. You learn, first of all, how they think about the issues. You might find out that they actually care about the same ends that you seek, and you might actually find ends that actually would serve a larger coalition of folks getting together to meet, to, you know, kind of towards the ends that you seek. So like I said, let go of your means for the moment, find a multitude of other means to get there, and then sit with that. And out of that kind of innovative, creative space, you know, an interesting, untraditional coalition can emerge, as opposed to the kind of the usual coalitions that can emerge when everyone already agrees on the means and everyone agrees on the ends. Because one of the problems with that is you're already divided. You know, you're already kind of locked yourself into your little group, your tribe, and the other tribes are locked in. And the way to kind of trans-tribalize that is to, as I said, help work with other people to find their means to your ends. So I'd encourage you, at least those three practices. The media fast, you're right. At least you're not right for 30 days. The self-inquiry, how do you take your stance? And then the means and ends. And I think those three practices would go a long way in helping you develop a transpartisan worldview, perspective, and way of operating in the world.